Midnight water tapes. Tonight, the rain is already falling. Not hard enough to wake the house, not sharp enough to become a storm, just steady enough to blur the windows and soften the corners of the room. It taps against the glass in a patient rhythm, like someone drumming their fingers very gently from the other side. If you are listening late, let that sound do what it came to do. Let it fill the empty spaces between the words. Let it cover the small noises of the night. Let it make the room feel smaller, warmer, and farther away from the places these stories come from. These are water stories. Lakes, quarries, frozen surfaces, deep ocean hulls, and black shorelines after midnight. Places where the world looks flat and calm from above, while underneath, everything drops away into darkness. Water has always been good at hiding things. It smooths over the surface. It erases footprints. It swallows voices. It can take something from the world without leaving a mark, and if it ever decides to return what it took, it rarely brings it back the same way. You do not need to sit up for these. You do not need to look at the screen. There is nothing here that requires your eyes. Just listen. Let the rain keep time. Let the room remain familiar around you. If the stories become too dark, remember where you are. You are not on a dock. You are not out past the breakers. You are not standing on frozen ice with your ear pressed to the surface. You are somewhere dry, somewhere safe, with the night outside and the door between you and it. The first tape begins on a lake that felt like home. The thing that matched my strokes. I grew up beside a lake, the kind of lake that becomes part of your childhood so completely that you stop thinking of it as a place, and start thinking of it as a room in the house. In summer, we were in and out of it all day. We ate sandwiches with wet hair. We dried towels over porch rails. We tracked sand across the kitchen floor until my mother stopped complaining because she knew it would only happen again the next morning. The lake was always there, beyond the trees, shining in the heat, quiet in the evenings, breathing mist when the sun came up. By the time I was 12, I knew every dock, every shallow patch, every drop-off where the bottom vanished under my feet. I knew where the reeds were thick and where the old stumps waited just under the surface. I knew which neighbors kept their boats tied too loosely and which houses stayed dark after September. And I was a strong swimmer. Strong enough that people trusted me in the water before they trusted me with anything else. I liked that feeling. In the lake, I never felt awkward or unsure. I knew how my body moved there. I knew how to breathe, turn, float, and pull myself through the dark water without wasting strength. Night swimming became my favorite thing. During the day, the lake belonged to everyone. Children yelled from docks. Motors growled. Radios played from pontoon boats. But after midnight, when the houses were mostly dark and the last porch lights trembled on the surface, the lake changed. It became wide and private. Warm at the top, cool underneath. The sky opened above it, and the stars seemed to touch the water. I would slip in from our dock, quiet as I could, and swim out toward the floating platform anchored far from shore. It was not a dangerous distance for me. I had done it more times than I could count. Out to the float, rest with my arms over the wooden edge, then back again. A long, lazy swim through water I trusted more than most people. That is why, when it happened, fear was not the first thing I felt. Confusion came first. I was halfway to the float on a moonless night, moving at an easy pace, breathing every third stroke, when I heard something beside me. A splash. Not loud. Not close enough to spray my face. Just a soft, rhythmic disturbance off to my right. Another arm entering the water. Another body moving beside mine. At first I thought one of my friends had seen me leave and followed me out. It would not have been strange. We did things like that in summer, stupid quiet games in the dark, trying to scare each other or prove we were brave. I turned my head between strokes and called a name. No one answered. The sound continued. I kept swimming for a few more seconds, listening carefully now. It was not random. It was not a fish breaking the surface or a wave against a floating branch. It was a swimmer. I knew the sound of swimming too well to mistake it. An arm cutting the water. A pull. A kick just below the surface. A breathless movement repeated again and again. Whoever was there was keeping pace with me exactly, close enough that the noise folded into my own strokes. When my right hand entered the water, something else entered beside it. When I kicked, it kicked. When I breathed, there was a slight disturbance near my ear, as if another face had turned toward the air at the same time. I stopped. The sound stopped. The silence after it was so complete that I could hear water dripping from my hair into the lake. I turned in place, treading water, trying to see into the dark. There was nothing. No head above the surface. No pale arm. No ripple spreading away. The float was ahead of me, a low black shape against a blacker horizon. The shore was behind me, farther than I liked. The houses were distant, their windows small and warm and useless. I told myself I had imagined it. Sounds play tricks on water. A person alone at night begins to hear patterns that are not there. I had been swimming in my own rhythm, and my mind had doubled it. That explanation felt thin, but it was still an explanation, and I wanted one badly. So I began again. The second I moved, it moved. This time I heard it clearly because I was listening for it. A stroke to my right. A kick below. A smooth body moving beside me in the dark. I changed pace, just a little. Faster for 3 strokes, then slower. It changed instantly. Not a half second later. Not after noticing and adjusting. It matched me as if it knew the movement before I made it. I shortened my stroke. It shortened with me. I let my legs drag. It did the same. I held my breath longer than usual, and whatever was beside me did not breathe at all. That was when the fear came. It did not arrive like panic, not at first. It rose cold and slow, up through my chest, the way deep lake water rises when your feet pass over a drop-off. I understood something while I floated there in the dark. The only reason I had noticed the other swimmer was because, for one stroke, it had been slightly wrong. A half beat behind. Just enough that the sound separated from mine. If it had not made that mistake, I would never have known it was there. It had been hiding inside my rhythm, using my own movement to cover itself. And it was getting better. I turned toward shore. I did not try to swim beautifully. I did not keep my practice pace. I thrashed. I kicked too hard. I slapped the surface with my arms and changed rhythm every few seconds. I broke every pattern I had ever learned. If the thing beside me wanted to hide in my strokes, I would give it nothing to copy. The quiet lake exploded around me. My breathing came too fast. Water went into my mouth and nose. My shoulder burned from the awkward angle of my pull. And in that chaos, I heard it separate from me. It was behind me now, or to the side, or somehow everywhere in the water near my legs. Smooth. Unhurried. Not panicked at all. I was making noise like an animal trying not to drown, while it moved with a clean, calm efficiency that made my skin tighten. It did not need to thrash. It did not need to rush. It knew where I was. It knew where I was going. Every few strokes I felt the water shift near my calf, a pressure without contact, as if something large had passed just beneath me. I wanted to look back. The desire was almost painful. My mind kept trying to make an image, because fear hates what it cannot picture. A person. A friend. A seal, though there were no seals in that lake. A log dragged by current, though the lake was still. But some deeper part of me knew that if I looked back and saw nothing, I would lose the last fragile piece of courage I had. And if I looked back and saw something, I would never reach the dock. So I swam. The dock appeared all at once, closer than I expected and still impossibly far. I reached for the ladder and missed it. My fingers scraped wet wood. I grabbed the side, kicked hard, and hauled myself up with no grace at all, banging one knee so badly it bled. I rolled onto the dock and crawled away from the edge. Only then did I realize I was making a sound, a small broken noise with every breath. The lake below me went quiet again. I did not look into it. I lay there until I could stand. Then I walked back to the house, dripping across the porch, and locked the door behind me, which was ridiculous because whatever had followed me had been in the water, not the yard. Still I locked it. I locked every door I passed. The next morning I expected the world to correct itself. Sunlight has a way of making terror look foolish. The lake was blue and ordinary. A neighbor's dog barked. My mother made coffee. My brother complained about cereal. For a little while I almost convinced myself I had panicked over nothing. Almost. Then my father asked why I had been swimming so late. I went still. He said they had seen me from the porch. My parents had been sitting outside after I thought everyone was asleep. They watched me swim out toward the float, and then back again. My mother said she almost called out, but I looked like I was with someone, and she did not want to embarrass me. She asked who the other swimmer was. I said nothing. My father smiled in that casual morning way people smile before they understand they have said something terrible. He told me there had been two of us the whole time. Two heads in the water. Two sets of arms. Side by side, all the way out and all the way back. Moving so perfectly together that, from the porch, it looked practiced. Like a routine. Like twins. They had assumed the second swimmer was a friend. I never night swam again. Years later, I can still smell that lake when summer rain hits warm pavement. I can still feel the dock under my palms. And sometimes, in a pool or in the ocean or even lying in bed listening to rain, I catch myself breathing in a rhythm and then breaking it on purpose. Just to be sure the sound I hear beside me belongs to me alone. The rain is still falling. Stay with it. Let the next tape turn over by itself. The Depth Finder. I fished the same big lake for 30 years, long enough that the maps felt unnecessary, and the names other people used for its coves sounded wrong to me. I had my own names. The Dead Pine Point. The Cold Pocket. The Church Drop. The Old River Bend. I knew where the bays held in spring, where the crappie gathered when the water warmed, where the bottom shelved gently, and where it fell away so fast your line seemed to drop into a different world. My boat was not fancy, but it was mine, and I kept it in better shape than I kept most things in my life. It had a good motor, a small cabin, and a depth finder mounted where I could see it without leaning. People who do not fish sometimes think of sonar as magic, but after enough years it becomes a language. The bottom is a line. Fish are arches or clouds. Weeds have their own cluttered look. Thermoclines draw strange bands across the screen. You learn the difference between a log and a school, between a hard bottom and a soft one, between an error and something real. That lake had deep water in the middle, deeper than it looked from shore. There was an old riverbed under it from before the valley flooded, a channel that twisted through the bottom and dropped to more than 100 feet in places. I loved fishing near that channel at dusk. The water above it seemed darker, even on bright days, and the fish there were bigger, slower, more patient. I used to joke that anything smart enough to live down there deserved to be caught with respect. One evening, late in September, I stayed out longer than I meant to. The air had cooled. The summer boats were gone. The lake was flat except for the small wake of my own drift. I had not caught much, but I did not care. There are nights when fishing is only an excuse to be alone on water while the sky changes. The sun had already dropped behind the trees, leaving a dull red line at the horizon. I was over the deepest part, right above the old riverbed, when the depth finder changed. At first I thought I had crossed an edge. The bottom line on the screen still read 110 feet, exactly where it should have been. But above it, rising from the darkness near the bottom, was a return I did not recognize. A shape. Not a school. Schools scatter. Even packed tight, they have texture. They flicker at the edges. This did not. It was solid. One continuous return, dense and bright on the screen, lifting slowly from the bottom as if the lake itself had decided to raise a piece of its floor. I watched it climb from 100 feet to 95, then 90. It was not drifting. It was not being pushed. It was coming straight up beneath me. I tapped the screen. A stupid habit, as if the machine might wake from a dream. The image remained. The bottom stayed at 110 feet. The shape rose to 80. I told myself the obvious things. Sensor error. Air bubble. Temperature layer. A tree caught in some current I did not know about. But I had spent 3 decades learning that screen, and none of those answers fit. A thermocline does not rise in a single solid mass. A log does not climb vertically through still water. A school of fish does not look like a submerged building, and it certainly does not move with the slow intention I saw there. At 70 feet, I reached for the motor. I did not start it yet. Pride is a strange thing. Even alone, with no one watching, I did not want to admit I was afraid of a picture on a screen. I stared down at the water instead. It was too dark to see anything beneath the surface. That made it worse. The lake above the thing was perfectly calm. No bubble rose. No swirl appeared. Nothing broke the surface to warn me that something large was moving below. The shape reached 60 feet. Then 50. It was bigger now, filling more of the display. At first it had been the size of my boat on the screen. Then larger. Then so large that I could not see all of it in the sonar cone. Its top rounded upward. Its edges were not smooth, exactly, but the return was too bright for detail. I remember thinking, with a kind of helpless absurd clarity, that if it kept rising it would hit the hull from underneath, and there would be nothing between me and it but fiberglass, bolts, and the thin confidence of a man who had always believed lakes were understandable. At 40 feet, I started the motor. The noise sounded obscene in the evening quiet. I threw the boat forward harder than I should have. The bow lifted. The lake opened behind me. On the screen, the shape stopped rising. For 2 seconds, I thought I had escaped whatever glitch had caused it. The bottom line shifted as I moved into slightly shallower water. Static flickered. The mass held at 40 feet. Then it moved with me. I watched it track under the boat as clearly as I have ever watched anything. It stayed centered in the sonar cone, directly beneath my hull, matching my speed. When I slowed, it slowed. When I pushed the throttle, it kept pace. It did not lag like something dragged behind. It did not fade as if I were leaving the area where it had appeared. It followed with calm precision, 40 feet down, through water I had crossed 1,000 times without ever wondering what might be looking up. I remember the sound of the motor. I remember the wind forcing tears from my eyes. I remember glancing from the dark water ahead to the bright, impossible shape on the screen and back again. There is a certain fear that comes from being chased by something you can see. This was different. This was being followed by an idea made visible only through a machine. If the depth finder had failed, if the screen had gone black, the thing would still have been there. I simply would not have known where. Halfway back, I crossed over a shallow ridge where the bottom came up to 60 feet. The shade dropped slightly to keep beneath me, as if it understood the changing contour. It did not strike the ridge. It did not get left behind. It adjusted. That was the detail that ended every comfortable explanation I had left. A drifting object does not know the bottom. A sensor error does not choose depth. A school of fish does not place itself between a boat and the lake floor like a shadow with intention. Near the dock, the lake grew shallow. 20 feet. 15. The shape finally slipped out from under me, not because it could not follow, I felt, but because it chose not to. It sank back toward deeper water, the bright mass shrinking on the display until the screen showed only bottom, weeds, and the ordinary small marks of ordinary fish. I tied up with shaking hands. For a long time I sat in the boat with the motor off, listening to the cooling engine tick. The shore lights looked unreal. The dock boards creaked beneath my feet when I finally climbed out, and that small wooden sound nearly made me cry because it belonged to a world where things were solid and familiar. I still fish that lake, though less often now. People think that makes no sense, and maybe it does not. But some places get into you too deeply to leave. I fish the coves. I fish the shallows. I take children out in the morning and show them where bluegill gather under the shade. I tell stories about the old days, about storms and big catches and motors that failed at bad times. I do not tell them everything. I do not go over the old riverbed after dusk. I do not cut across the middle anymore, even when it would save time. And I never turn off the depth finder, because I would rather know. That may be foolish, but after that night I learned that ignorance is not safety. The dark under a boat remains dark whether you look at the screen or not. Sometimes, when I am cleaning gear at the dock, I hear a distant splash from the middle of the lake. Probably a fish. Probably a turtle. Probably nothing. But I always look toward the deepest water, and I think of that solid return rising 100 feet through blackness, not in hunger maybe, not even in anger, but in curiosity. Something big enough to fill my screen. Something patient enough to rise from the bottom just to see what was making noise above it. Something smart enough, when I ran, to follow me home. You are doing fine. Let your breathing settle. The next story is colder. The voice under the ice. Up north, winter changes water into something people trust too easily. A lake that could drown you in August becomes a road in January. Families walk across it. Trucks park on it. Children skate over places where the depth below them is black and total. You learn to read ice the way other people read weather. Clear ice, white ice, pressure cracks, old snow, new snow, the hollow boom that rolls under your boots when the sheet shifts in the cold. It sounds frightening if you did not grow up with it. If you did, you call it normal. The lake near our town froze early most years. By December, the ice was thick enough for huts and snowmobiles. By January, people stopped going around it and started going across. The shortest way from my friend's house to mine was a diagonal line over the lake, maybe 20 minutes on foot instead of nearly an hour by road. I had crossed that way so often I could do it half asleep, following the dark line of trees on the opposite shore and the faint glow from houses beyond them. The night I heard the voice was clear and brutally cold. The kind of cold that makes every star look sharpened. Snow squeaked under my boots. My breath came out white and vanished behind me. The ice was safe. Not just safe in the way people say things are safe because they want them to be, but truly thick, measured, used, crossed all week by trucks heavier than anything I would ever bring onto it. I remember that because I have spent years trying to find the weak point in the story. There was no weak ice. There was no open hole. There was no place where a person could have fallen through. I was near the middle when I heard it. At first, I thought the ice had groaned in a strange pattern. It does that. Sound travels under frozen surfaces in long, eerie ways. A crack far away can seem to speak right beneath your feet. I stopped walking and listened, smiling a little at myself for being startled. Then the sound came again, and it was not ice. It was a voice. Faint, muffled, pressed in by the frozen sheet between us, but human. It came from below me. Not from across the lake, not from the shore, not from the wind moving through trees. From beneath my boots, under the ice, inside the black water. Help me. I froze. The words were so clear that my body reacted before my mind could argue. Someone was down there. Someone had gone through and been carried under the sheet. That was the nightmare everyone knew, the story told every winter as a warning. A person falls through a hole, comes up under solid ice, sees the pale moon above them, and cannot find the way back to air. I dropped to my knees so fast pain shot through both legs. I swept snow away with my gloves, searching for a crack, a dark patch, anything. There was nothing. The ice was whole. The voice came again. Please. I am down here. I am so cold. Help me. It sounded like a young man, maybe a teenager, terrified and exhausted. I pressed my ear to the ice. The cold burned through my hat. The voice sharpened, close now, directly under me. I could hear something else with it, a faint tapping or scraping, as if fingernails were touching the underside of the ice. I shouted that I was there. I shouted that help was coming, though I had no phone signal in the middle of the lake and no idea what kind of help could reach someone sealed under unbroken ice. I got up and turned in a circle, looking for any sign of an opening. The frozen surface stretched smooth in every direction, silver under the stars. No hole. No broken edge. No wet snow. No scattered gear. The lake had been sealed for months. If someone was under it, then they had been under it since before winter, and no living voice should have remained. That thought came slowly, and with it came another. The voice had not been getting weaker. It had been waiting. I knelt again, though every instinct told me not to. The pleading stopped the moment my ear touched the ice. For a few seconds there was only silence beneath me, deep and heavy. Then the voice changed. It no longer sounded cold. It no longer sounded frightened. It became calm, almost gentle, and much closer than before. You can hear me. Good. My throat closed. Most people cannot, it said. I pulled my head away from the ice, but I did not stand. I could not. The cold had gone out of the night somehow, replaced by a numb pressure that held me there. I stared at the cleared patch of ice between my gloves. My own reflection looked back faintly, distorted by frozen bubbles trapped below. Come closer, the voice said. Put your hands on the ice. I did not move. Please, it said, and now there was a smile in the word. I just want to see your hands. Under the ice, something pale moved. Not far away. Not drifting past in the depths. directly beneath the spot where my face had been. It rose from the black water slowly, as if it had been waiting just below the limit of sight. At first I thought it was a patch of ice within the ice, or trapped air, or moonlight caught in a strange place. Then it pressed upward against the underside of the frozen surface, and the ice between us whitened around it. It was not a face. I need to say that because my mind tried to make it one. It was pale and broad and soft-looking, with suggestions of shape where no shape should have been. It flattened itself gently against the ice, testing the boundary. The tapping sound came again. Not frantic now. Curious. I saw, or thought I saw, something like fingers spread from within the pale mass. That broke me. I ran. Running on ice is a bad idea. Everyone knows that. You keep your steps measured. You do not panic. You do not let fear make your body stupid. I did all of it wrong. I slipped twice and tore one glove. I slammed my shoulder hard enough that I felt the bruise for weeks. Behind me, under the ice, the voice did not shout. It did not beg anymore. It simply followed for a while, speaking from beneath my feet in that same calm tone. Slow down. The ice is safe. Come back. I only want to see your hands. The worst part was how the voice stayed beneath me longer than it should have. I was running toward shore, changing direction, slipping, stumbling, but the sound moved with me under the ice. Not always directly below, but close. Close enough that when I felt a second time and my bare fingers touched the cleared ice where my glove had torn, something tapped upward from below, once, very softly, under my palm. I made it to shore and did not stop until I reached the road. I could not feel my fingers. My lungs hurt. When I looked back, the lake was empty and still, the same wide white field it had been when I stepped onto it. No shape moved beneath the surface. No voice called from the middle. The stars were bright. The houses waited in the distance. Everything looked safe. The next day, I told no one the whole truth. I asked around carefully, pretending curiosity. No one was missing. No one had gone through the ice. No old accident matched what I had heard. A few people gave me the usual explanations. Ice sings. Sound carries. The mind makes words from noise when it is tired and cold. I accepted those explanations in the way you accept a blanket that is too thin. You pull it over yourself anyway because it is better than nothing. But I know what asked to see my hands. I know what rose pale beneath the ice. And I know that the frozen surface people walk across so confidently is not a floor. It is a door. A clear, cold, temporary door laid over a whole dark world of water. We cross it with sleds and skates and fishing gear. We laugh on it. We build fires above it. We forget that below us, the lake has not gone anywhere. It is still there, black and moving and sealed away, listening for footsteps, waiting for someone kind enough, frightened enough, or lonely enough to kneel down and answer when a voice calls from beneath. If your eyes are closed now, let them stay closed. You do not need to see for this one. The dock at night. The lake house was not ours in the grand old family sense. We had not inherited it from anyone, and there were no sepia photographs of great-grandparents standing on the porch. My parents bought it when I was already grown, after years of saving and talking about someday. It was small, weathered, and a little crooked, with a screened porch, 2 bedrooms, and a narrow path down to a wooden dock that reached into the lake like a finger pointing at something below the surface. I loved that dock immediately. In the mornings, I carried coffee to the end and sat with my feet over the water while mist lifted from the lake in slow white sheets. In the afternoon, we swam from it. At sunset, dragonflies moved above the boards and fish made small rings near the posts. The dock creaked in a friendly way under bare feet. It smelled of sun-warmed wood, rope, and lake water. It was the peaceful center of the whole place. For the first few weeks, nothing felt wrong. We were busy making the house ours. We fixed screens, painted trim, found where the mice had been coming in, and learned which neighbors waved and which preferred not to. At night, the lake was black beyond the porch lights. I liked that too. I liked hearing it move softly in the dark. Then one morning, I found the footprints. I had gone down early with a mug in my hand, still half asleep, expecting mist and quiet. Instead, I stopped halfway along the dock and looked down at the boards. Wet footprints led from the ladder at the far end toward shore. Bare feet. Adult-sized. Fresh enough that water still shone in the grain of the wood, each print dark against the pale boards. Heel-arched toes. Step after step. Someone had climbed out of the lake during the night and walked up the dock. At first, it was only annoying. That is how ordinary the world still was to me. I assumed a neighbor had gone for a midnight swim and used our dock without asking. Rude, but not terrifying. I followed the prints back toward the house. They faded before the grass, drying as they went. By the time they reached the end of the dock, there was almost nothing left. I mentioned it over breakfast. My father shrugged. My mother frowned in the way she did when imagining liability. If someone was swimming off our dock at night and got hurt, could that become our problem? We asked the nearest neighbors. Everyone denied it, not defensively, just with the mild confusion of people who had no reason to lie. No teenagers had been visiting. No guests. No one had been out late. The next morning, the footprints were back. Same starting point. Same direction. Up from the ladder, along the dock, toward shore. They looked so similar that I wondered if I was seeing stains left from the day before. But when I touched one, my fingers came away wet and cold. After that, they came every morning. Always from the water to the land. Never the other way around. That detail bothered me more than anything at first. If someone was swimming, where were the prints going down? Why did no wet footprints lead from the house or the lawn to the dock? Whoever made them did not arrive from shore. They only emerged from the lake. We tried practical things. We left a chair near the path to see if anyone moved it. We tied a thin fishing line across the steps leading up from the dock, low enough to trip or at least catch on someone's ankle. In the morning, the line was still tied. The footprints passed beyond it anyway. We sprinkled pale sand at the start of the path. The next day the dock was wet, the prints crossed the sand, and no grains clung to the boards beyond. It was as if the feet carried water but no weight. By then, the prints had begun reaching farther. At first they stopped at the end of the dock. Then one morning they continued on to the first flat stones of the path. A few days later they reached the lawn. Dark wet ovals pressed into the grass, bending it down in two neat lines. They did not wander. They came straight from the lake toward the back of the house. I began watching at night. I set a chair by the window facing the dock and turned off the lamps behind me so I could see out. The first night, I watched until 2 in the morning. Nothing moved. Moonlight silvered the water. The dock lay empty. Frogs called from the reeds. My eyes burned. Sometime after 3, I blinked too long or drifted too close to sleep, and when I snapped awake, there they were. A trail of wet footprints shining on the dock, fresh enough to glisten. I had not seen anyone climb out. The second night, I drank coffee and kept the window cracked so the cold air would help me stay awake. I stared at the ladder at the far end until the shape of it seemed printed inside my eyes. No hand rose from the water. No head appeared. The lake remained flat. Then, around the hour when night feels deepest and even insects go quiet, my eyes watered. I wiped them with my sleeve. It took less than a second. When I looked back, the footprints were there. Not appearing one by one. Already made. As though something had crossed the entire dock in the instant I was not looking. There are fears that make you scream, and there are fears that make you very still. This was the second kind. I sat in the dark with my coffee gone cold and understood that whatever climbed out of that lake did not need time in the same way I did, or did not allow itself to be seen moving through it. It waited for the smallest mercy of the eyelid. A blink. A glance away. A moment of human weakness. Then it advanced. My parents wanted to leave earlier than planned. I argued against it because I did not want to admit how badly I wanted to leave too. Instead we stayed, and the footprints kept coming closer. Across the lawn. To the first porch step. Then the second. Each morning, they dried by noon. Each night, I told myself I would see it. Each night I failed. There was always some tiny break. A yawn. A shift in the chair. A moth hitting the window and drawing my eye. And there would be the prints, shining in the moonlight, a little nearer than before. The last morning we spent there, I woke to my mother screaming. The footprints had reached the back door. They came from the lake, up the dock, across the grass, over the porch boards, and stopped at the threshold. Wet bare feet, toes pointed toward the house, close enough that the final prints touched the bottom of the door. Water had pooled there, a thin dark line against the wood. The doorknob was dry. The lock was still turned. Nothing had opened. Not yet. We packed that day. We told ourselves we had other reasons. Work. Weather. Repairs. We closed the shutters, drained the pipes, locked the door, and left before sunset. That winter my parents sold the place for less than it was worth. The buyer asked why we were giving it up so soon. My father said we had realized lake life was not for us. Years have passed, and I still think about that dock. I think about the ladder dipping into black water. I think about the patient path from lake to house, lengthening by a few steps at a time. I think about how polite it seemed, in the worst possible way. It did not break windows. It did not pound on walls. It simply came closer every night, as if following rules older than the house. As if a door had to be reached before it could be crossed. I do not know what happens on the morning the footprints do not stop at the threshold. I do not know if they lead into the kitchen, down the hall, to the bedrooms, or to the place where someone is sleeping with their face turned away from the door. I only know we left before the wet prints came inside, and sometimes, when rainwater tracks across my entryway from ordinary shoes, I still check to make sure the toes are pointing out. Breathe slowly. The rain has you. The next tape sinks deeper. The diver's light. I used to love dark water dives. That sounds strange to people who only know diving from vacation photos, all bright reefs and clear blue water, but there is a different beauty in places where sunlight does not reach. Flooded quarries, deep reservoirs, cold inland pits with steep walls and machinery rusting somewhere below. They are quiet in a way the ocean is not. No coral, no color, no bright fish sliding past your mask. Just stone, silt, cold, and the beam of your own light cutting a narrow path through the black. The quarry where it happened had been a working pit decades before. Then the company left, the pump stopped, and water filled the wound in the earth. Locals used it in summer, but only near the edges. Divers liked it because it was deep, colder than expected, and full of things to find. Old cables, metal frames, a sunken platform placed there for training. There were rumors too, as there always are around deep water. A car down somewhere no one had reached. A missing worker from the old days. A shaft that went deeper than maps showed. Most of that was nonsense. Divers love stories almost as much as sailors do. I had been there several times. I knew the entry point, the training lines, the shelf where the temperature dropped so suddenly it felt like passing through a curtain. I was careful. I checked gear obsessively. I planned my dives and stayed within limits. That day, my buddy had cancelled late, which should have been enough reason not to go. But I was experienced, the weather was good, and I convinced myself I would keep it simple. Down the wall, brief look around, then up. Nothing heroic. The water near the surface was green and dull. 10 feet down, sound softened. 20 feet down, the summer warmth vanished. At 30, my light became the only thing that mattered. Beyond its cone, the quarry had no edges. Just black water pressing close, swallowing distance. I followed the wall with one hand near the rock, watching silt drift in slow clouds where my fins disturbed it. At depth, time changes. Every movement becomes deliberate. You hear your own breathing louder than thought. Inhale, bubbles, exhale, bubbles. Gauge check. Depth. Air. Direction. The world is reduced to instruments, and a circle of light. I had reached the deepest point I intended to reach, close to my personal limit, and I was preparing to begin my ascent when I noticed another light below me. It was small at first. A pale point in the black under my fins. My first emotion was irritation, which now seems almost funny. I thought another diver had come in below me without warning, and I was annoyed at the recklessness of it. No recreational diver should have been deeper than I was in that quarry. Visibility was poor, the water was cold, and the bottom fell away into places that made even experienced people cautious. I held position, one hand against the rock wall, and looked down. The light rose. It was steady. Too steady. A diver's lamp moves with the diver. Even a very controlled swimmer has some sway, some bob, some tiny arc from fin strokes and breathing. This light did not. It climbed in a straight vertical line as if pulled upward by an invisible cable. No beam came from it. That was the second wrong thing. A dive light cuts water. It shows particles, silt, rock, the edge of a hand. This glow illuminated nothing. It was simply there, a pale round brightness in the black, moving up through darkness without touching any of it. I angled my own light toward it. The beam did not reach far enough to show what carried the glow. It should have. The distance was closing. My lamp picked out drifting particles between us, then nothing, then the pale point rising. I saw no mask, no tank, no bubbles. That bothered me most. A diver below me should have been exhaling. Bubbles should have streamed upward, silver in my light, impossible to miss. There were none. The glow continued to rise. I checked my gauge automatically, because fear underwater becomes dangerous when it interrupts routine. Depth. Air. Time. I told myself to ascend slowly. I told myself not to bolt. But my eyes kept dropping to the light. It was closer now, and with that closeness came a terrible realization. The light was not being carried by something small. It was attached to something larger that remained below it. I cannot explain how I knew. I did not see teeth. I did not see a body. I saw only the pale glow, round and patient. But the darkness under it seemed shaped. Not visible, not exactly, but present, a pressure in the water, a suggestion of mass so large my mind refused to draw an outline around it. The light was not a lamp. It was a lure. The front of something. The little harmless part meant to hold your attention, while the rest rose underneath. My training saved me for a few seconds, and then fear almost killed me. I began my ascent faster than I should have, then forced myself to slow. I watched my bubbles climb past me. I vented air. I checked my computer. I kept one hand near the wall and tried to maintain control while every primitive part of my body screamed to kick straight upward until I broke the surface. Under me, the light followed. Not chasing. Following. That was worse. Chasing has urgency. This had certainty. It rose at the same smooth pace, adjusting as I moved, staying below and slightly behind, just inside the lower edge of my vision. Whenever I looked away to check my ascent rate, I felt it come nearer. Whenever I looked back, it seemed exactly where it wanted to be. My own light shook in my hand. The beam jumped across stone and silt, making shadows that looked like fingers reaching from the quarry wall. At my safety stop depth, I tried to hold. I really did. Anyone who dives knows the importance of those minutes. You respect pressure or pressure punishes you. I hovered there, body trembling, computer counting down, while the glow waited below me. It stopped too. Not directly under my fins now, but just beneath the limit of clear sight. It held position, pale and steady, as if it understood waiting. As if it knew I had been taught not to rise yet. I remember thinking that no animal should know that. No light should pause with you in the dark because your machine says 3 minutes remain. I lasted less than 1 minute. Then the glow brightened. Only slightly. Just enough that for an instant I saw something behind it. A curve. A texture. A suggestion of a surface that was not rock and not water. Something broad moving upward with the light at its center. My body chose survival over training. I kicked for the surface, dumping air, trying not to scream into my regulator. The last 30 feet felt endless. The world above me turned from black to green to a dim gray ceiling. I broke through gasping, spit out my regulator, and grabbed the nearest rock at the quarry edge. My computer complained. My lungs burned. I hauled myself out clumsily and lay on stone, shaking so hard I could not unclip my gear. I did not look back into the water until the sun was low. By then the quarry surface was calm. A few insects moved over it. The entry rope floated where it always did. Nothing glowed below. No bubbles rose. No sign remained of anything that had climbed toward me from the deeper dark. I was lucky. My ascent was too fast, but not fatal. I spent the evening watching myself for symptoms, and telling myself what I would say if anyone asked. Nitrogen narcosis. Poor visibility. Panic. A reflection. Those are useful words. They give people somewhere safe to put a story. I do not dive dark water anymore. I still dive sometimes, but only where the sun reaches everything, where the bottom is visible and blue water stretches around me instead of black. People tell me that clear water can be dangerous too. Of course it can. But fear is not always about danger. Sometimes it is about what a place teaches you. That quarry taught me that the deep has its own lights. And the light is never the thing itself. The light is the part you are allowed to see, the part designed for your eyes, the patient pale promise rising out of the cold while the rest of it remains below, enormous and silent, coming up underneath in the dark. Almost there. Stay soft. The next tape comes from a lake that returns what it takes. The lake that gives things back. The town where I grew up had a lake on its northern edge, a long narrow body of water tucked between low hills and old pine woods. It was pretty in the way postcards are pretty. A public beach at one end. Fishing docks near the road. Cabins scattered along the wooded shore. In summer, tourists stopped there without understanding why locals treated the place with a caution that did not match its beauty. Every town has stories. Ours had one about the lake. People said it gave things back. When I was a child, that sounded almost sweet. If you dropped your keys from a dock, they might wash ashore a week later. If a storm tore a rowboat loose, the lake might leave it upside down in the reeds instead of sinking it forever. My grandmother told me once about a wedding ring lost in July and found in October resting on a flat stone near the boat launch, clean as if someone had placed it there. Adults smiled when they told those stories, but not for long. The smile always faded before the end. Because the lake did not only give back objects. The story everyone knew, though no one liked to tell children, was about a boy named Daniel. He had drowned long before I was born, back when the beach had no lifeguard and the dock extended farther into deeper water. He was 11 or 12 depending on who told it. Old enough to swim, young enough for people to say the world had been cruel. One hot afternoon he went under and did not come back up. They searched for weeks. Divers came. Boats dragged lines across the bottom. His father walked the shore every morning until his shoes fell apart. Nothing surfaced. The lake kept him. Then, 3 years later, Daniel walked out of the water. That sentence was always spoken quietly. Not a body washed up. Not bones. Not a piece of clothing. Daniel himself. He came out near dawn at the public beach, walking from the shallows in the same shirt and shorts he had worn the day he drowned. He looked the same age. Same hair. Same narrow shoulders. Same scar over one eyebrow from a bicycle fall. A man cleaning the beach saw him first and nearly fainted. By sunrise the whole town knew. By noon his mother had him home. I have tried, as an adult, to imagine what that must have been like. Not from the outside, where it becomes a ghost story, but from inside that house. A mother who had buried nobody, who had spent 3 years with grief that had no ending, opens her door and sees her child standing there wet and silent. What do? You do not ask if he is real. You do not test him like a stranger. You pull him inside. You wrap him in towels. You thank God or the lake, or whatever you think has returned him. Love does not wait for explanations. For a few days, people called it a miracle. Then the details began. Daniel did not eat. His mother made soup, bread, eggs, cakes he used to like. He only looked at them. He did not sleep either. At night, his family heard him moving softly through the house, leaving wet footprints in the hallway. No matter how they dried him, he became wet again. His hair dripped. His clothes clung to him. Water gathered under his chair and spread across the floor in slow circles. It smelled not like lake water in summer, but like deep water, old water, water that had never seen sun. He did not speak much at first. When he did, his voice sounded thin, as if it had traveled a great distance before reaching his mouth. He asked where the lake was, even when sitting in a room facing it. He asked if the windows could be opened. He asked why everyone breathed so loudly. That detail stayed with people. He would turn his head toward his mother, his father, his younger sister, and tell them to breathe quieter. At night, he sat by the window that overlooked the water. The family said he whispered there. Not to himself. Toward the lake. His sister, who was 9 then and old by the time I heard the story from someone who knew someone, said the lake whispered back. She described it as a sound like reeds rubbing together, though there were no reeds below that window. A soft answering murmur came from outside, from the dark water beyond the yard. Daniel would tilt his head, listening, and sometimes he would smile. Not happily. Patiently. The family tried to keep him away from the shore. At first gently, then desperately. They locked doors. They nailed windows shut. His father slept in front of the back door on a cot. None of it mattered. Daniel did not fight them. He did not need to. He simply waited. There was something unbearable, people said, about how patient he was. A living child wants things. He cries, argues, laughs, gets bored. Daniel sat wet in his chair and looked at the lake as if time had become meaningless to him. The house began to rot around him. That part is not always included in the legend, but my grandmother swore it was true. Mold spread along the baseboards. Wallpaper peeled in the bedroom where he slept, though he never slept. The floor under his favorite chair softened from constant damp. Towels left around him turned sour within hours. The family smelled of lake water wherever they went. His mother lost weight. His father stopped speaking at work. His sister began sleeping at a friend's house and then refused to come home unless Daniel was kept in another room. But how do you reject a child returned from death? How do you tell your own grief that it has made a mistake? For almost a month, they tried. Then one night, Daniel stood from his chair. His father woke immediately, though no sound had been made. He saw the boy in the dark hallway, facing the back door. The lock turned before Daniel touched it. The door opened. Outside, the lake was black and calm under a thin moon. Daniel walked across the yard. His parents followed, calling his name, begging him to stop. He did not run. He did not even look back. Water dripped from his sleeves and left a shining trail through the grass. At the shore, he paused. His mother reached him and grabbed his arm. She said later that his skin felt colder than anything alive. Daniel turned to her then, and for the first time since he had returned, he looked almost like the boy she remembered. Sad, tired, sorry. He told her, I was not given back to stay. Then he walked into the lake. The water closed around him without a splash. His mother tried to follow, and had to be dragged back by her husband. They searched again, of course. Everyone searched. But Daniel was gone, taken a second time by the place that had never truly released him. After that, people stopped calling the lake generous. Lost objects still returned. A tackle box gone in spring might appear under someone's dock in fall. A red canoe that sank during a storm might be found resting neatly on the sand weeks later. But no one celebrated those little miracles the same way. When the lake gave something back, people looked at it carefully before touching it. As a teenager, I went there with friends because teenagers are drawn to places adults warn them away from. We sat on the public beach after dark, daring one another to swim. I never did. I told people the water was too cold or that I did not feel like it. The truth was that I always imagined the lake keeping inventory. Everything dropped, drowned, sunk, or surrendered, all held somewhere below in a dark patience we could not understand. I left town as soon as I was old enough, but I still dream about that lake. In the dream, things are arranged on the shore. Keys, rings, toys, boats, shoes, people I have lost. They sit in a neat wet line just beyond the reach of the waves, returned but changed, waiting for someone to be grateful enough to take them home. The worst thing about a lake that gives things back is not that it takes. Every lake takes. The worst thing is the giving back. It means nothing is finished down there. It means the dark water keeps what it claims, works on it in silence, and returns it only when return will hurt more than loss. Some things should remain at the bottom. Some griefs are kinder when they are not given a face. Some doors should stay closed, even if what knocks from the other side sounds exactly like someone you loved. 2 more. Let the rain slow your thoughts. The next one is far from shore. The knocking on the hull. I spent 3 years working on a small cargo vessel, long enough to learn that the ocean at night is not the same ocean people admire from beaches. From land, the sea has an edge. It arrives in waves, turns white on sand, and retreats. From the deck of a ship hundreds of miles offshore, there is no edge. There is only water in every direction and depth beneath you that the mind cannot hold for long. Our vessel was not large by commercial standards. Big enough to cross, small enough that weather mattered and everyone knew every sound she made. Engines, pumps, cables, loose galley drawers, the low flecks of metal in rough seas. After a few months aboard, you could tell by sound alone whether something was normal. A ship is a house, a machine, and a body all at once. It complains constantly. You learn which complaints are harmless. My bunk was near the waterline. At night, lying there in the dim heat and stale air, I could hear the sea sliding against the hull inches from my head. Sometimes it slapped. Sometimes it hissed. In bad weather it boomed like someone throwing furniture against the steel. That proximity changes you. You understand that your life depends on a boundary thinner than your imagination wants it to be. Inside, light, breath, coffee, dirty socks, jokes, charts, and tired men. Outside, miles of black water pressing patiently against metal. The crossing had been uneventful for days. No storms. No engine trouble. No traffic close enough to matter. We were far from land, moving through a moonless night over water so deep the numbers on the chart seemed abstract. I was off watch, trying to sleep, when I heard the first knock. One sound. Clear, deliberate, and close. Knock. It came from the hull beside my bunk, from the outside. Not a creak. Not a wave slap. Not the irregular thud of debris. It had the shape of intention. Knuckles on a door. A person announcing themselves. I opened my eyes and listened. For a while nothing happened. The ship moved. The sea whispered against steel. I told myself I had dreamed it. Sleep at sea is thin. Sounds enter dreams and come back altered. I had almost convinced myself when it came again. Knock. Then, after a pause, knock. I sat up. Every small hair on my body seemed to lift at once. There was nowhere for the sound to have come from except the water side of the hull. We were more than 100 miles from the nearest land, in deep ocean, at night. Nothing with hands should have been out there. Nothing with patience should have known where my head was. I put on shoes without turning on the light and stepped into the passageway. Another crewman, Luis, stood at the far end in a t-shirt, looking pale. Before either of us spoke, the knock came again, not from my cabin this time, but farther forward. Knock. A third man opened his door. Then someone from night watch came down the ladder too quickly, and told us they had heard it from above. Along the hull. At the waterline. Moving. We gathered in the mess because people do that when fear is too strange to face alone. The room smelled of old coffee and oil. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead. No one joked. That alone frightened me. Sailors joke through almost anything. Bad weather, injuries, near misses, terrible food, worse decisions. But that night, everyone listened. Knock. This time it came from the starboard side. Knock. Then aft. Knock. It circled us. Slowly. Patiently. one knock at a time. Not hammering, not clawing, testing. The sound moved along the hall as if something outside were making its way around the ship, touching the steel, waiting after each tap to see what answered. Sometimes the knock came low, near the waterline. Sometimes higher, against places that should have been out of reach unless whatever made the sound rose with the swell or held itself against the side in a way I still cannot picture. The captain came down, listened for less than a minute, and ordered a sweep. We checked lines, rigging, anything that might have come loose and struck the hull. Nothing. The sea was calm. No debris showed in the searchlights. The radar was clean. We were alone. Except we were not. The knocking continued for nearly an hour. During that hour, time stretched into something unbearable. We stood or sat in the mess, heads turning as the sound moved. No one wanted to be alone in a cabin. No one wanted to go outside, though several of us did in shifts because not knowing was worse. On deck, the night was absolute. The ship's lights made small yellow islands on wet metal. Beyond them, the ocean was black and flat, reflecting nothing. When the knock came from below while I stood near the rail, I felt it through my boots. Knock. A vibration up the steel. Gentle. Almost polite. One of the older hands, a man named Reeves who had been at sea longer than I had been alive, did not look surprised. That bothered me. Fear I could understand. Confusion, anger, denial. But Reeves had the grim, tired expression of someone hearing an old debt called in. When I asked him what it was, he told me to stop asking questions and not to look over the side. Of course, that made me want to look. The human mind is a traitor around mysteries. It would rather see something terrible than imagine something endless. I stayed away from the rail after that, but the wanting remained. Every knock asked a question. What are you? Where are you? How many of you are there? Are you touching the hull with hands, claws, bones, or something that only sounds like knuckles because that is the sound we understand? Near dawn, the knocking reached my cabin again. I know because I had gone back there, against my own judgment, to get my jacket. The room was dark. The porthole was a round black mirror. As I reached for the hook by my bunk, the sound came directly beside me. Knock. Not loud. Soft enough to be intimate. I should have left. I should have remembered Reeves and the rail and every old rule that says when something knocks from the dark, you do not answer by looking. But the porthole was right there, and the knock had been so close that for one impossible second I felt certain a human face would be outside. A survivor. A stowaway. A man overboard from some vessel we had not seen. Something I could help. Something I could name. I moved the curtain. At first I saw only black water and a faint reflection of my own face. Then the reflection changed because something on the other side moved closer to the glass. I will not describe it fully. Not because I want to be dramatic, but because language turns things into shapes, and shapes make them smaller. I saw enough to understand that it had been looking in before I looked out. I saw a surface pale in places and dark in others, pressed near the porthole without fogging it. I saw something like an eye, but not placed where an eye should be, and not alone. I saw an expression, if that word can be used, of delighted recognition. Something inside had finally looked up. It knocked once more, very gently, against the glass, exactly where my face was. I fell backwards so hard I hit the opposite wall. By the time others reached me, the knocking had stopped everywhere. At dawn, the ocean was empty. We found no marks on the hull that explained it. No damage. No dents. No scratches anyone could agree were new. The captain wrote nothing in the official report beyond routine checks. The company was never told. At sea, some stories become expensive if written down, and some become madness if spoken too often. Reeves found me later and said only one thing. The deep comes up at night sometimes. It knocks on ships the way children knock on aquarium glass, to see whether anything inside is awake. I left the sea not long after. People assumed I was tired of the life, and that was true enough. I live inland now, far from any coast. I still hear knocks sometimes in old buildings, pipes settling, branches touching windows, neighbors at doors. I answer them like anyone else, but never immediately. And never at night without first making sure the sound came from the side of the door where land still exists. Last one now. Let this be the one you fall asleep to. The one who floats just offshore. I spent one summer in a small town on the coast, a quiet place of white houses, narrow roads, and gulls that screamed like they owned the sky. It was the kind of town people described as peaceful because they only visited in daylight. There were flower boxes under windows, old men repairing nets they no longer needed, a single grocery store, and a beach that curved around a cold gray bay. I rented a room above a retired teacher's garage while working remotely and pretending I was there to finish a book. Mostly I walked. In the mornings, I walked to the harbor for coffee. In the afternoons, I followed the cliff path. At sunset, I sat on the beach and watched the tide pull light apart. For the first few weeks, I thought I had found the gentlest place in the world. Then I noticed that no one local went to the beach after dark. Tourists did sometimes. Couples with flashlights. Teenagers daring each other to run into the surf. But townspeople avoided it with a consistency too complete to be coincidence. Restaurants emptied toward the inland streets, not the water. Dog walkers turned back before the sand. Even the teenagers who looked like they wanted to be brave stayed near the road once night settled. When I asked, people gave small answers. Cold at night. Slippery rocks. Bad currents. Nothing worth seeing. But they said these things while not quite looking at me, and that made me keep asking. The woman I rented from finally told me. Her name was Mrs. Calder, and she had the practical manner of someone who did not enjoy superstition but respected it the way one respects a cliff edge. We were sitting in her kitchen while rain moved across the roof. I mentioned going down to photograph the beach at night. She put her mug down and said, very quietly, that I should not. When I asked why, she looked toward the window though the sea was not visible from there. Because of the one who floats just offshore, she said. She told it plainly, without theatrical pauses. Every night after dark, if you stood on the beach and looked past the breakers, you could see a figure in the water. Upright. Head and shoulders above the surface. A little way out, farther than a person could stand, in water too cold and rough for anyone to float calmly. It faced the shore and did not move. Night after night, year after year, it remained there, watching the town. There was only one rule. You could see it, but you must never acknowledge it. Do not wave. Do not call. Do not point it out. Do not lift a flashlight toward it. Do not let it know that you know it is there. Because if you did, Mrs. Calder said, it would begin to come in. I asked what that meant. She said nobody liked to talk about the times it had happened. Of course I went. Not that night. I told myself I was more mature than that. I lasted 2 days. On the third night, restless and embarrassed by my own curiosity, I walked down after 11 with a flashlight in my pocket and no intention of using it. The town behind me was quiet. Windows glowed here and there. The road ended at a low set of steps leading to the sand. The tide was coming in, and the waves broke with a steady white hush. At first I saw nothing. Only water, dark ridges moving under a clouded moon. I stood with my hands in my jacket pockets, feeling foolish and relieved. A buoy, I thought. A seal. A trick locals used on outsiders. Then a wave lifted, and beyond it, something remained upright when everything else fell. A head and shoulders. Just offshore. It faced the land. The distance made details impossible, but the shape was unmistakably human in the way nightmares are human. Too still. Too vertical. The waves moved around it without moving it. Water rose and fell, but the figure stayed at the same height, as if suspended from below. No swimmer could have held that position. No person could have been in that cold water so long without struggling. Yet there it was, facing the beach, facing the town, facing me. I did what people always do when confronted by something impossible. I tried to make it ordinary. A buoy. But buoys tilt and flash and are marked on charts. This had shoulders. A surfer. But there was no board, no movement, no reason to sit beyond the breakers in darkness. A seal. But seals do not watch you with the stillness of a person waiting to be invited. Moonlight. Driftwood. A trick of distance. Then the cloud shifted, and I understood that it was looking directly at me. Not at the shore in general. Not at the town. At me. The beach seemed to narrow around my feet. The sound of the waves grew soft and far away. I remembered Mrs. Calder's rule with sudden perfect clarity. You may look. You must not acknowledge. Looking, apparently, was allowed or at least expected. The figure had been seen many times. Seeing was not the invitation. The invitation required a gesture. A wave. A call. A sign that the boundary between watcher and watched had been accepted. That was when I felt the pull. I do not know how else to describe it. Not a voice, not exactly. Not hypnosis. More like the social pressure of someone waving at you from across a street, multiplied until it became physical. My right hand wanted to lift. Every polite instinct in me insisted that if someone was standing out there in the cold, watching, I should respond. Just a small wave. Acknowledgement. Kindness. Proof that I saw. My fingers twitched in my pocket. The figure did not move. I remember thinking, absurdly, that it must be lonely. That was the thought that nearly got me. Not fear. Pity. The idea of standing in cold water night after night, waiting for someone on shore to admit you were there. My hand slid halfway out of my pocket before I realized what was happening. I clamped it against my side. The waves hissed up the sand and touched my boots. I backed away without turning. The figure remained offshore, upright and patient. I took one step, then another. My heel struck a piece of driftwood and I almost fell. For one terrible instant, my arms lifted for balance. Out in the water, the figure seemed to lean forward. I forced my hands down. The pull became anger then, or something like it. Not mine. I felt watched with disappointment. The air tightened. The next wave came farther up the beach than the last, spreading cold water around my shoes. The figure had not moved closer, I told myself. It only looked closer because I was afraid. But another wave broke behind it, and I saw that the distance between us had changed by a few feet. I turned only when my boots hit the bottom step. Then I ran. I did not look back until I reached the road. When I did, the beach lay pale and empty below, but the water beyond the breakers held a dark upright mark. Still there. Still facing shore. Maybe farther out again. Maybe not. I left town 4 days later. I told Mrs. Calder I had finished the work I came to do. She nodded as if she knew exactly what had been finished. Before I drove away, she gave me one last piece of advice. Inland roads are faster, she said. Do not follow the coast at night. I have never returned, but I think about that town whenever I see a dark shoreline. I think about the simple cruelty of the rule. You may see the thing that watches, but you must pretend you do not. You must deny your own senses to keep it away. And it waits in a place where loneliness does half its work for it, because beaches at night attract lonely people. People who want to be seen. People who want to believe that something out in the dark is looking at them for a reason. The figure is still there, I am sure. Floating just offshore after dark, head and shoulders above the cold water, patient as the tide. Waiting for someone tired, sad, curious, or kind enough to stand on the sand and feel that terrible pull. Waiting for one raised hand. One call across the surf. One human gesture of welcome. And then, inch by inch, wave by wave, it will start to come in. That is all the tapes for tonight. You made it to the end, or maybe the rain carried you somewhere softer along the way. Either is fine. These stories are done now. There is nothing left but the sound of water falling safely outside, water that stays on the glass, water that does not rise from beneath the dock or press upward under ice. The room around you is still the same room. The floor is solid. The door is closed. The shore, if there is one, is far away. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your jaw unclench. Let the pictures fade first, then the words, then even the rain, until it becomes only a soft gray blanket over everything. You do not have to follow any sound into the dark. You do not have to answer anything that knocks. You do not have to look back at the water. You are on dry land tonight. You are warm. You are safe. Sleep well. And when the next tape begins, it will begin without you needing to reach for it.